Yep. All right, three, two. Well, I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Christian Underground podcast. Again, I'm your host, Joe Sheehan, and I am super excited about today's guest. You can see him on the screen with me right now. This is Jason Farley. I have been listening to Jason probably for the last year and a half, 2 years on another podcast, the Chocolate Knox Unplugged podcast with Chocolate Knox from the Cross Politics guys. Highly recommend you guys go check them out, look them up. And it's super exciting because I know Jason to be a very learned and very educated young man, and is definitely working on bringing Christ back into the arts. And with that being said, Jason, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here, and yeah, the underground is always important, and so excited to see somebody going after the Christian underground.
Well, yeah, our desire here is to give a voice to some people who feel like, the things that they've experienced, the things that they've gone through, that the church may not have categories for, can have a voice, and we can provide a biblical perspective for that.
Fantastic.
Mhm, mhm. So, one of the first things that I'd like you to do is go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and the like. We'll give an opportunity at the end of the podcast for you to, drop any kind of like .coms or web addresses that you'd like them to know. But just introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Jason Farley, and I am the content officer for LOOR TV, which is a new streaming service that it launched about 6 months ago, and it is designed to give Christians and conservatives direct access to their audience without executives in the way. So you see that a lot of the control that happens in media, in movies, in television. It happens at the executive level because they're the ones that have the purse strings. But the reality is, they're just controlling the funds of the people that are subscribed to their channel or that are buying tickets or renting their movies, that sort of thing. So, what we've done is built a platform, a technology where the people have the ability to decide how their entertainment money is spent rather than giving it to a conglomerate, giving it to a big channel, Netflix, something like that, and letting them decide. So it's a place where the subscribers decide how the subscription money is spent with a voting process. We use video game currency and kind of a gamification process to let the subscribers decide how the subscription money is spent. So I've been working there for just over a couple of years, and to really try and give artists freedom again to just serve their audience, to worry about serving their audience, telling the truth, to really build out a Christian underground in the movies and television space, because there's no distribution right now in any sort of Christian underground. So we've been working on that for a while now, because we know that that's how you actually build out the kind of intellectual properties, the stories, the worlds, that sort of thing. To get big budget things made, you have to start by proving out artists and building audiences. And so that's the phase we're in now, with the idea that if Christians are given equal footing, then they can compete in the arts. And the reason that we've had a hard time competing in the arts, besides some of the retreat mentality that we've had, the other reason is we aren't on equal footing. We're usually having to rent the pipeline of Hollywood in order to do anything, and that puts us at a disadvantage. So we're trying to solve those problems through God's means, through capitalism.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's God is, owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and the
Exactly.
funding's out there. What I love about the idea is, especially from an underground perspective, is I love Lore's crowdfunding option because it forces people to kind of put their money where their mouth is. You know, there's a lot of Christians out there that, bemoan Hollywood, that talk about Hollywood, Disney and all these types of things. But then when you ask them, well, have you heard about LOOR TV? They have this blank face. Like, what are you talking about? And it's like, well, you're not hard to find. They're
Right.
out there. There's ways in which Christians can to speak into this space, and that's what's really interesting. My listeners know that my background, I started out in the arts, right? And I know that from, I love film. It's the medium that I feel like speaks most to me. And I found LOOR through a friend. A friend told me about LOOR. He's like, dude, because we were talking about how terrible Christian films were. We were just wishing and just crying out for great content that we could watch around our family, and that we didn't have to protect our family from, and things like that. And he was like, dude, you got to check out LOOR TV. And so the first LOOR TV show that I checked out was Dark Holler. And
Yeah,
I
which
just
is a fantastic show. That it was one of those shows that was too too explicitly Christian for any sort of secular
mm,
space, but uh too scary and real for the normal Christian market, because it's the story of a of a small church with a just a little Baptist church that suddenly found itself. It's a true story. It's a docu series. Suddenly found itself with a ministry outreach to this hundreds-year old cult, demon worship, and having to learn how to deal with and understand the demonic realm and demonic oppression. And it is it's really well shot, well told story, of something that a lot of Christians want to know about, but the media has flinched at, and kind of looked the other way. And when we do demon possession themes, um, because of because we don't want to glorify it, we end up um intellectualizing or over intellectualizing, where we you have demons, but but it ends up being uh, a, a debate, um with a demon, instead of what you see in the Bible and what you see in reality when you run up against these things, is that it's an idolatry issue, that it's a power issue, that it's wrapped up in a fear control situation. And so watching being along for the ride with people as they work through it in real life, in real time, makes for really compelling television, and
mhm.
really, I think wonderful, useful, beautiful content.
Oh, absolutely. And I know the gentleman that was the cinematographer. I can't remember what else the role was. It Josh or Jason or something like that. I
Yeah,
know that he had. Oh, so good.
yeah, we're good.
Okay, okay. So I know that he had a background, like he works with people like Glenn Beck. He's working with Merkle Media right now, with their content. So I mean, this wasn't, for anyone who's listening or watching right now, this isn't just, what you're used to seeing when it comes to Christian film, where it's, someone's cousin who's learning how to use a camera for the first time.
Right,
And
right.
it's
Yeah, you've
these
got
are
these really
people.
talented filmmakers that they just need an opportunity to to tell the stories. They know how to do it, but to tell the stories that they're really passionate about, rather than the stories that they can get, that either deciding, here's a story I can get funding for, or uh, um here's a story I'll compromise to make because I can, because there's already an open channel for it. And that just you that's distribution has always been the stranglehold. I mean, even when as I've been, as a writer, one of the questions I get, I write something that because I want to write it, and then I get the question, wait, what is the genre here? Because I need to know which marketing pipeline I need to put it in. And if it doesn't fit one of those pre-established marketing pipelines, then it's not going, you don't know how to sell it. And if you can't make money off it, you can't get more art. Right? And an important part of the business. But
Mhm.
what's happened is the people with the money have basically paid Christians to stay in one particular lane and said, here is the distribution we'll allow you. And they control all the distribution, and they give us the quote unquote faith-based market. Um, and that means it has to fit into a particular mold for their marketing machine. And if it doesn't, then it is either trimmed down until it does fit in the mold, or it just doesn't ever get marketed. Well, the audience doesn't want the faith-based stuff. I mean, there is an audience for the quote unquote faith-based market. But it isn't happy with it either. Everybody knows, yeah, most of it's not good. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty awful stuff. And I think that's why there's two sides to that coin. I think they want to be, they're thinking in marketing terms, so they need to be able to market it. But at the same time, they know that if they label it this, it won't be successful because
Right.
of but for how long because I mean we're going back to, I mean, some of the early Christianized films are, Cecil B. DeMille and that, which, that was when Hollywood was trying to market to a Christian audience. But then it kind of fell away with the Artur independent house, art house film of the 1960s. And then you have the Jesus movement coming back in that area, and you start getting, those cheesy rapture films. What was it, Mark of the Beast, and
Yeah.
what was
The
I
one
saw
with
all
the
three
ice,
of them.
the one with the ice cream cone, that
Yes,
that terrified everybody. Well, yeah, what one was that?
yeah. I mean, but I grew up in that space, so I grew up in that house, and my grandmother had all three of the Rapture films, the Mark of the Beast, this present, or it's not This Present Darkness, that's Frank Peretti.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and then in the 80s it kind of, you feel like it kind of dissipated for a little bit, and then the 90s is when you really start seeing things kind of come back, and I think maybe the success of Bible Man, who had the guy, for the blonde guy from Charles in Charge.
Charles in Charge. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think what you have is the 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 market was always there. Right? The church um was hungry for media, and it always has been, and I think it always will be. You see that that's not new. That's throughout history. There have been, you know, there's been good Christian art and bad Christian art, and the church has always um, been supportive of the arts, and the best stuff from the previous eras always lasts, and you get sometimes you get this illusion that there's always been all of the Christian art has always been good, but you have, bad Christian poets, guys like Smith Wigglesworth, um,
Yeah.
or it was it Smith Wigglesworth, no, or Wigglesworth. You got bad Christian poet. I think Smith Wigglesworth was the evangelist, um,
Yes, the charismatic.
and then the charismatic evangelist, but the guy before that uh, was the poet Wigglesworth, and it sold a bunch of copies in its day, but now you look at it and you say, oh, that wasn't good, it just happened to strike a nerve, but it didn't last, right? It didn't stay in print. Whereas you have something like Dante, or uh Chaucer, the really great Christian art, down to Gerard Manley Hopkins, late T.S. Eliot, that never goes out of print, right? Stays in print the whole time because history sifts the bad art out, and the art that's more universal um, stays. Well, but what you don't have is a bunch of Christian movies that are standing the test of time yet, right? Um,
Yeah.
so, and
So
it's
I,
not that
oh, sorry.
we don't have talented filmmakers. The film, you've got really talented Christian filmmakers, but what happens is a little bit of success in the faith-based market actually uh, uh, pushes them out of that market, right? Once you've had a little bit of success, you're pushed out of that market because as the budgets go up, you no longer fit there anymore. And so the talented Christian filmmakers actually move out of the Christian film space, and there's always somebody willing to work for the low budget that's coming up behind them, and you, uh, so it's so in a lot of ways the Christian film market ends up being a training ground for people that then go into the maybe the family space in Hollywood or something. But there's definitely a stained glass ceiling for Christians in Hollywood, right? They bump up against you uh this at certain levels. So um the pipeline is currently uh got just huge holes in it.
Well, yeah, and that's why I love Lore TV is because and even Angel Studios is that it's 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 an effort to try to raise that quality, raise that funding so that we can keep the talent in that space. But also it gives a platform and it gives a place, like especially Lure, where you can have a dark holler. You can have
Right.
what's there's a show that's trying to fund right now that's an anime that it's Angels and Demons and
Um,
what's that?
y- yeah, over at Angel Studios, you've got the Guardians. Um,
Guardians.
yeah,
Yes.
which yeah, so really talented animators that have created that uh that and we talked to them early on, and they just you anime is expensive, so they just needed
Yes.
a lot more than we could get budget wise. But yeah, I've been rooting them on for a while over there, and they're at Angel now developing a uh, uh, pre-flood angel demon um, anime, right? Which
That is
the
that I'm excited
artwork's
about that. Yeah.
amazing. The story that
Hmm.
they're pitching is fantastic. So I'm really hoping that they
Yeah.
execute it well, because it's such a it'll be a huge win to get some
Mhm.
really solid Christian anime out there.
Well, and I'll be honest with you. Yes. Um, my daughter, my middle daughter, is huge into anime.
Hmm.
She's an artist. And anime is her people. She's also she's also on the spectrum, and so she's not someone that really puts herself out there, even though she's getting more brave, which is what I love, and I love seeing it. And it's because she's finding her people, like she's finding,
Right.
and anime is one of those things that is bringing her out. And we went to an anime convention here in town, and I mean, when I saw she did the cosplay and everything, and she was incredible. She was walking up to other cosplayers and asking for photos, and they were asking her for photos. And this is something, if you know that if there are people that are on the spectrum, they don't do.
Right.
They don't talk to people they don't know. I mean, when we first walked in, she was holding onto my arm, kind of hiding behind me, wanting me to walk up to people and ask for photos. By the time we left, she was taking photos with people, they were taking photos with her. It was incredible. And so this is a space, the anime space is a place where there needs to be a Christian influence, largely because those people are largely unchurched. If you go to
Absolutely.
if you go to those conventions, I mean, they are either rejected, they've been hurt by the church, or they're unchurched.
Yeah.
And even Japan is right for the gospel itself. So I love that. And I love that it's a Genesis 6
Yeah.
theme. I'm counting down the days because I want to watch that with my daughter. But tell me about some of the projects that right now are looking like they're going to be almost completely funded on Lure that you're
Yeah.
aware of.
So Well, so one of the things that we've seen as we've started this process is that the marketing for the faith-based uh, market assumes that all Christians are the same kind of person. But the reality
Mm,
is, you've got all different kinds of people that become fans of different kinds of things because it connects with different people for different reasons. So we've got a really great. So, for example, we've got a really great cartoon that's called Barely Biblical. That's about animated stuffed teddy bears reenacting the most violent Old Testament Bible stories. Right, so
I
they
love it.
tell the story of the Bible, and these teddy bears reenact it, and they could do the violent ones because blood is stuffing, and when when you cut off the head of the bear, and like, for example, you've got the story of the army chasing the Philistines out. Well, the Bible says, and that they were uh that wolves and ravens came in after it to eat the dead bodies of the enemies of God. Well, we you uh it would be that would be a tough sell in a Christian show, but when
Yeah,
it's teddy
yeah.
bears, you can have the ravens fly in and picking out the stuffing and then taking it back to build their nest with, and
Mhm.
it's cute and funny, but you're learning the real story of the actual Bible, and so that one has been one of our most popular shows. The first episode is funded and done. The second episode is actually getting really close as well. So but it's on the funded. It's in the process of being made. And I've read the scripts; they're really funny, and we've got things like the the Jewish bears and the Gentile bears. You can tell them apart because the Gentile bears all have a full tag, and the Jewish bears all have a clipped tag, right? And so every time circumcision is mentioned, it just get a cutaway of the tag, the clipped tag, and it's hilarious, right? So um, it's a really well done TV show. Animation's great, the voice acting is top notch. And the writing's fantastic. So we got that one. So that was Barely Biblical. We've got, and then we have, you know, great shows like, Behind the Beards and Bikes, which is a reality style TV show about masculinity, right? Focusing in on men that ride motorcycles and what masculinity looks like in all of their lives, right? So just reminding the world that being a man is a good thing, right? That kind of show with a really talented filmmaker. It's been in the industry for decades, and there's no place where men where saying this dude is a man is a good thing anymore. And so he's on our platform, just telling those stories, which is I think that's a really important show, but it's also just it's a beautifully shot show. Where the first episode, one of the men that they spend their time with talking about masculinity is a guy who makes throwing axes for a living, right? He's like a professional
Nice.
axe thrower. It's just just where it's a good thing to be a man again. So
Yeah.
and then
That's good.
uh, we have a new um, channel on our show on our network that is called Fridge Magnet. That's experimental shorts, experimental animation, to the same way that you have the old Liquid Television or the Cartoon Network when it started, uh, Nickelodeon when it first started, where you have experimental shows, but a short version of them to see, hey, do people like this? So Fleur de Lis is a really popular show we have on Fridge Magnet that is that where the episodes are, it's about a husband and a wife who are just trying to make ends meet down in the bayou. Right? It's just a fantastic, it's a funny show, but it's a heartwarming show as well. We have our first sci-fi there. It's set in the world of Esoterra, a futuristic show. The first episode's called Artificial Intelligence. It's almost funded. It's about to fund. It'll probably fund maybe this weekend. It'll be funded by the end of the weekend. So and that one is just a great show um that uh, and people have been asking for sci-fi, but there's no place where Christians are doing sci-fi on a consistent distributed uh, place because there's nobody that believes there's a market for it. But it's absolutely the most common thing we get requested, right? Where's the sci-fi? And so we've been hunting for sci-fi for a while. And what happens is you've got artists that would love to make sci-fi, but they've been told their whole career there's no market for it, which is just not true. There's a huge market for it. So we've got a show, another reality TV show called Breaking Laws with Joseph Granda. He's a
Yeah,
comedian that's traveling the country, breaking the most ridiculous laws he can find and filming
yeah,
it,
breaking the blue
turning
laws.
himself into the cops. Yeah, so it's fantastic. It's very
Yeah.
funny.
Well, he
And
needs to come to
just
Fort Worth because we have a ton of them. We have a ton of them. We really do,
he,
and nobody
I,
knows it. Like it's actually illegal to spit on the sidewalk in Fort Worth.
Oh, really? I think
Yeah.
episode two um is going to be filmed in Fort Worth, actually. I don't know what the law he's trying to break is, but I'm pretty sure
Oh
he's
yeah.
filming episode two
Well, he should
in
spit on the sidewalk.
yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah, because
So,
well, and it's because of the tobacco, right? Because we're a
oh,
cow
okay,
town. It's
okay.
because of the tobacco and the ladies in long dresses that were walking through the streets would get tobacco on their lace, and
Stains
so
on,
that's why
yeah.
they, yeah,
That and that's we live in such we live in a world where we solve everything with laws, and and every story that we tell um in Hollywood, that's how they solve problems, right? If there just ought to be a law, right? We'll make it illegal. You go to the highest power you can find and get the highest power to enforce it. And that's just not the world that God built. So um he changes people from the inside out. There's all sorts of things that are sins but not crimes in the Bible. And and um but so a TV show that just fights back by being legitimately funny, and that it's entertaining, but also says, do we really want to live in this kind of world? Look at all the ways that this kind of world goes wrong. Don't you think the way God made the world is better? So that sort of TV show, I mean, that's why it's so important for Christians to get into the arts, is
yes,
because the arts, storytelling, music, movies, television, novels, poetry, all of those things have uh, have an effect on our neighbor, right? It's a way
mm,
of loving our neighbor, and
mm,
but also telling the truth in a way that they're glad that they got told the truth, right? And that's the reason that Christians who have any sort of inkling or calling into the arts should be encouraged and go all in. It is a neighbor serving job, right? And all jobs are neighbor serving in a good, solid, free capitalist society, But the because people used to get rich by going and stealing from their neighbors, right? It's piracy. The book I'm reading right now is a history of English piracy. It's an
oh wow,
amazing book. It's a lot of fun, and but that was the way you used to get rich. But in a capitalist society, the way you get rich is by serving your neighbor, right? The one who serves their neighbor the best is the one uh, who the one who adds the most value to the lives of their neighbors. Or you receive value in the form of money for it. You can and the developing your art, developing your storytelling abilities, you working on your craft, and then serving your neighbor by telling great stories beautifully. It really is a way to serve your neighbor. And when you realize that, um, and you're using your art that way, it's a much more effective way of fighting back against the propaganda than being a critic, which is what often, unfortunately, we fall into at reactionary critic stance, and we all become Anton Ego, and just the pleasure of food is that we spit out the stuff that's bad, and then write
Yeah.
about it. And he said, like he said, it's fun to write a scathing criticism, but there's no risk to it. You're not useful to
Yeah.
anyone, to being a critic. Whereas, if you've got a love of the arts and you develop your craft and you serve your neighbor, you can make a significant dent for good, in the lives of people with good art. So, that's why I'm so passionate about building a platform that makes it possible for artists to get paid when they add value to people's lives. Because too many
Well,
artists are adding value to people's lives, but they don't know how to. And
yeah.
people would love to give the money, but there's no way to do
Mm,
it, right? So we're trying
mm.
to really develop a platform that makes it possible to say, this artist continually adds value to my life. I'm so happy that I get to pay up front for the next one. That sort of mentality is, I think, what we've got to develop. And just then, hopefully, now that we've built the technology, we can build the community that's excited to,
Yeah.
you know pay for the art.
Well, and I think, it comes from, you're talking about this is a way to love your neighbor. And that's definitely, scripture here in the Christian underground that we're all about is First Corinthians, 13, 1 through 8, the love chapter. You know, that was one of the things about my guests that I see a lot is for them, what set them down the path that they went down was that they had an epiphany moment when reading scripture. For the $1 million brain professors that I've had on my show, it's usually reading it in the original Hebrew or original Greek and seeing it for what it says for its. But for me, this journey began probably 5 years ago, and I was pursuing a PhD and they had me read a book. I've had that author on the show. He was my third guest or my second guest. I can't remember. And Dr. David Koizes, who wrote a book about political ideology and how that the ideologies can become idolatry. And because of the promises of a fake salvation that these ideologies promise. And so I read his book. And then as I'm going down that path, first of all, I'm being convicted as a political idolater. The second, I'm reading the scripture and I'm reading through the book and I read First Corinthians 13. And my listeners have heard this story, but I don't mind telling it again because it needs to be continually said. As I'm reading it and I'm seeing all what Paul is writing about, if I do not have love, I'm just a noisy gong. If I do not have love, I'm just all these things. And it gets to the point where he says, love bears all, believes all, hopes all things. And when I read that part, the Holy Spirit spoke in my heart and said, "Are you doing this to these political people that you're destroying with your words? That you're destroying these people. You're making them feel like they're this big. Are you doing that to them? Are you hoping and bearing and believing all things in them?" And when I read that, I hit my knees. When I heard that, I hit my knees and I just repented. And it started this journey. And so the love is definitely focus. Like, if you love your neighbor, it's I think it was I think it's Penn and Teller who was quoted as saying that if you really genuinely believe that hell is a real place and you say that you love me, because he's an atheist,
Yeah,
he's a professing atheist, right? And I'm botching the quote, but it's if you really believe that hell's a place and you really say that you love me, why would you not try to proselytize me? Why would you not try
right.
to tell me and keep me from going to hell? And so that's why he doesn't get offended for that. And I think that using our art as a means of kind of flanking maneuver with these people or with unbelievers and believers both is so crucial because one of the things that I see too, in especially in Twitter and in this space, is even Christians are attacking one another on issues of doctrine and issues of faith on these spaces. And wouldn't it be nice if the arts started unifying us again?
I mean, I think that's the thing, is a good story, good art, is the beauty of it is what makes it compelling, right? So, um, the and beauty is something that, it just, as people made in the image of God, it's something that we just respond to. You don't, um, you don't see, there's no young guy that uh that had to be argued into being attracted to a girl, right? Like it's something that you just respond to. You say, "Whoa, she's beautiful." I want to get her number. I would like to be with her more, right? The beauty of it is the argument. You don't, you don't get talked into it. Well, it's the same sort of thing with the truth. The beauty of it can be very convincing, but we don't we don't know how to use the craft that God has given us in the arts to just say, well, here's a well told story. We always want to turn everything uh, into a moral. Here's the moral of the story at the end. I'm gonna boil it down to its moral, but that's just not how good storytelling works, right? And it's the same with a good painting, a good stained glass window, a good song, good music. The artistic craft of it is what makes it compelling, right? The beauty of it is what makes it compelling, and that's something that has been used against us, uh, because we don't know how to respond well and do it well, and all of that. So, um, but the other thing is that Christians have often thought that what they need then is to go into high art, right? That the high art is the thing that does that the best. Um, but when I was in high school as a punk rock kid, and we used to gather into garages and and basements and people's dorm rooms for shows, and it was never, you weren't going to see Van Halen, the high level talent. You were going to see three chord three chord garage punk, and the community of people that were gathered around that were moved by it. That was a major part of the what made punk rock compelling. It was misfits and outsiders, that found a place where they weren't exiled. And in a lot of ways, that kind of underground art, those underground movements, um, they gather uh, they gather outsiders by being willing to tell the truth in those spaces, and then end up having major influence in the long run, in back into the culture, the same sort of way that David and his mighty men, David and his army of misfits out in the wilderness, ends up becoming it turns out that all along that's where the throne room was, right? That's where the court was. It was wherever David was, and it happened to be filled with outsiders. And in the same sort of way, I think Christians need to just start thinking that way. We've get Not in terms of how do we get another blockbuster, how do we get another Passion of the Christ. And it's fine when those things come along and they happen and they're good. But what we don't, but blockbusters have never been the thing that moves the culture, right? It's when we um, create those groups of, or when we create a space to gather those groups of outcasts and misfits, and give them the freedom to make art for one another, that
Yeah.
we really get the art moved forward, the cultural capital moved forward. Something like
Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that starts as a um, tiny hand drawn uh, early '80s weird idea, ends up
Hmm.
becoming incredibly influential, and
Hmm.
having a whole series, a series of blockbusters, first the first blockbuster, um, that with the suits and Vanilla Ice, all of that, and then even a
Yeah.
reboot blockbuster with Michael Bay,
Hmm.
and you end up with
Hmm.
uh, the second round being an even bigger blockbuster than the first, and all of that is because um, they it resonated so well with the kids who felt like outsiders, right? The kids who
Yeah.
say, "Hey, what if there was an even cooler place that wasn't in my high school. It wasn't in my junior high. It wasn't where the cool kids are. It's down in the sewers. And they look like freaks. And but they're
Yeah.
comfortable with who they are, and they
Hmm.
live in they live in the sewers, and they're the good guys, right? What if
And
that
they
was
just happen to be ninjas.
they just happen to be ninjas, right?
I mean,
They
that's super cool too.
So mutant turtles that happen to be ninjas that were raised by a mutant rat, who's trained in the ancient art of ninja in Japan, right? Like that story
Shinobi.
resonated with a whole group of people that felt like they had been
Mhm.
pushed out, right? And
Mhm.
it's the punk rock of comic books, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's the same to just like Van Helsing or Hellboy, right? That's the
Yeah.
punk rock
The
of comic books. Really,
Mhm.
that whole Dark Horse thing. So it's all the punk rock underground of comic books, and it
Absolutely.
ends up becoming the mainstream
Mhm.
because it told the truth, and gave kids hope, that they're that them not being the cool kids, not being the pretty kids, whatever, that there still was a place in the world for them. So I mean, I think as Christians, we got to quit worrying about being the cool kids anymore. Quit worrying about the blockbuster, and really just serve those niche audiences that already feel like they're um, that they're the exiled ones, and be willing
Yeah.
to make the kind of to be willing to support the people that want to make art for them.
Well, and I think, when I'm looking at it from the perspective of someone who wanted to be a filmmaker, you know, um, I tried my hand when I was in my 20s. One of the things that I tried to do was I started out as a videographer, right? And I wanted to try to just build. I had a screenplay. I actually had a couple of screenplays that I wanted to turn into films, but I knew it's like, okay, so I studied filmmaking and I studied script writing and I studied these things and I studied my favorite directors. And I mean, I bought every book I could find on them, like Martin
Yeah,
Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas and really kind of the auteur filmmakers of the 1970s and 80s. And what I found was what you're talking about. These guys knew that they weren't going to make it in the studio system. And so they went and just did it themselves and they did guerrilla filmmaking. And their films are now the films that people study when they're studying film. Mean Streets, The Conversation. You've got George Lucas THX 184 or something like that.
right.
And these are the films that they're going out there. And I think, what Christians, exactly what you're saying, and this is just something that's kind of come across me. I don't know if this is true or not. You've been in that space, so you could speak into this and you can tell me I'm wrong or not. But when I looked at some of these Christian films that were being released by brothers, I can't remember their name off the top of my head right now, but
The
their
Irwins and
films are
there's the
getting
Kendricks both.
the Kendricks, right? And then there's the
Yeah,
ones that did like the courageous films and things like that.
yep, the
Those were
Irwins.
better. Yeah, those were better films than some of the earlier stuff like the Omega Code and Left Behind and all of that. But what I saw in a lot of these films was the big money producers were usually some mega pastor somewhere. And it's like, yeah, they want a bigger bang for their buck, so they want to make these blockbuster movies. And it's like, no, the space is the art house. we need to be getting into, we have an art house theater, independent film theater here in North Texas called Magnolia. And then there's another one that is like the Angelica. Okay. And this is where, if you want to go watch who are the new up and coming filmmakers, you go watch them. You go to the
Right.
Angelica. And I mean, there's some really horrible films that I would never, and I'm not saying they're like they weren't good. The subject matter is terrible.
Right.
And then there's some really good films that you're like the first time that I saw Scotland, PA. Okay. Okay, great film, incredible
Amazing film.
remake
Yeah.
of the Scottish play. Okay, incredible remake. I mean, and I died laughing when I saw that it was Christopher Walken
Oh my gosh,
was
he was
was
so good in
Macduff.
that. He was
Oh, he's
so
so
good in
good.
that.
So good. And but I saw that at the Angelica, right? And this is that film. I mean, it's a low budget film. It's a work of love. These people wanted to make
Yeah.
Macbeth, but they wanted to tell it in a modern story. And so that's what I'm saying. And so that's why I wanted to have you on this podcast, is because we're the Christian underground. That is what we're doing. I grew up punk rock too. You know, my big fans were the Irish punk bands like the Pogues
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah. Yeah, you had the Pogues, and you had what was it Molly? What was the
Flogging Mollies.
Flogging Molly? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some
Dropkick Murphys.
Dropkick Murphys. Yeah, you had three.
Yeah.
I mean, those were beasts musically. And but
Yes.
then they're Irish, the Irish punk. Um, and that was the interesting thing too about the punk rock movement is you would have some hardcore punk band come to town, and then the three opening bands would be like a a cowpunk band, right? Like sped up country. You have a uh
Yes.
garage rock or garage punk band maybe, and then
Mhm.
a pop punk band, or maybe another hardcore band, or maybe like a nerdcore rap or something, right? You and everybody looked at it, was like, "Yep, we're all the same because we're all this niche. We're supportive of one another, because even if maybe I'm not like, you know, um, I'm not into hardcore. I get that those people are also feeling the same way, right? And they've latched
Right.
onto hardcore, whereas I've latched onto, you know, garage revival, Stray Cats or something, right? But you have these different, but they came to, and the same thing happened with Comic Con, right? You have people in all sorts of different niche communities that gather together for Comic Con. And so whether
Mhm.
it's the Trekkies, people that love Star Wars, people that love anime, right? Those early Comic Cons, um, they were more diverse than a a liberal protest trying to stop traffic in California, right? It's people all over the map
Yep.
that you wouldn't ever expect to be on the same page,
Mhm.
and I think that's because of that realization that we've been left out of mainstream culture, right? And this is why the first rap album recorded was a Blondie punk album, right? It was
Yes. Yes.
you had a
Yes.
punk band that recorded the first rap song, but it's because
Yep.
the rap groups and the punk groups were playing in the same bars. They knew each other. They actually were interacting a lot with each other's music. You had uh, if the new there's a new Run DMC documentary that just came out. It's really good. But when he starts listing his favorite albums, a bunch of them are new wave punk, because they used to tour with these groups and play in the
Yes.
same
Yes.
bars. And so those are his friends. It's uh
Yeah.
DMC's friends are the
Right.
same, are in that same movement. Well, it's because the early hip hop in Brooklyn, and CBGB's punk rock is coming out of New York in the exact same
Mhm.
era, and they saw each other as a part of the same movement. And then the
Yes.
marketers split them apart, right? And it's
Yes.
the same thing
Yes.
now.
Mhm.
If
You
the
only fit in this little box. So you
Yeah,
only get to be in this
exactly.
little box. And when we send you out on these marketed concerts, we don't think that your fans are going to enjoy Run DMC. And that's why I love the fact that Run DMC got with Aerosmith
Yeah.
and did Walk This Way. It's because it was
Well, and
like they got back into it, you know?
what's funny is at the time the Run DMC was like, is this going to be an error? Is this going to be a mistake? Because they didn't know, because they didn't know if people were going to get it or not, right?
Mm.
So they
And
they had to.
it was a great song. Oh my gosh, it's
It
still one of my
was, yeah.
favorites. Yeah,
But and
it's still
and
one
it
of my favorites.
really, in a lot of ways, it was a revival for not a revival for their career yet, but it was
Mm.
a big move forward because it introduced them to a whole new audience who looked at the rest of their stuff and was like, "Oh no, these guys are great." Right? And I mean, and this is where when the art is good and it's honest and it's well made and the craft the commitment to the craft is there, art crosses all sorts of boundaries that we're told can't be crossed, right? Like,
I
the when Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg dropped their album, all of a sudden you had all these suburban white kids wearing puffy jackets and starting to
Mhm.
walk with a limp and learning how to crip walk and all this stuff, and you're like,
Yeah,
what do these suburban white kids have to do with Compton? Well, it's
yeah.
the art was true, right?
It was transcendent.
The experience, they were communicating a true experience, and
Yeah,
it was transcendent. Now it was transcendent, I think, in the wrong direction, right?
true, true.
But it connected. What connected with people was, that they're living in this plastic culture. The other art forms are reaching their are have been commercialized beyond beyond recognition. You look at the R&B, the mainstream R&B at the time, the mainstream hair metal at the time, right? It's commercialized beyond recognition, and then you get this truth telling um, art that comes in saying, "Hey, let me tell you what's behind the plastic." Right, when you peel the plastic away, this is what life is like, and I think it did. I think it did damage in a lot of cases. But the reality was, they said, "Hey, that plastic culture is lying to you," and that was true. Right, telling that
Yes,
truth made it possible for them to be the ones that came in and told an alternative story. And I think the
yes,
alternative story was it was the subsidization of the destruction of the black community by making the gangster and uneducated people the ideal, violence the ideal, sexual promiscuity the ideal, rather than early hip hop, which you had a lot of really college educated. Rap was famous early on college campuses. The before woke became what it was, the idea was, let's get an education, let's tell the truth, let's be poets. A lot of
let's
jazz
tell the
heads and
story of our people in the ghetto,
right,
not
yeah,
as not an idealized story or not a stereotypical story, but let's tell the truth of what the life was like being raised in the projects, yeah, I
right,
mean, when you listen to the early hip hop, they're literally taking their slam poetry and putting it to music. And the music, and then the genius behind that hip hop was sampling the music that they sampled and being able to put those beats behind that.
right.
And I mean, yeah, it's a genius. There was another show that I loved. Okay, first of all, none of these shows I'm advocating for to go watch because many of these shows are not very Christian, and I would definitely not watch some of these with your children in the room. But there's the movie about CBGB with oh gosh,
Alan Rickman, that
Alan
one,
Alan Rickman. Yes,
yeah.
amazing movie, and it's all the music of my misspent youth, which I absolutely love. I still do to this day. And then there's Vinyl, which was on HBO. And Vinyl was the first story about the music industry that showed the underground nature of hip hop.
Yeah.
That showed that I mean, they're literally having their concerts in the basement of a project building. And these guys are taking the music that these guys are producing and they're laying they're mixing it. Oh, I'm terrible with names. It's a result of too many concussions. But oh, what's the DJ for Run DMC?
Oh, Jam
Master
Master
Flash.
Jay.
Jam Master Jay. It's Jam Master Jay is who they have. It's like they're going to
Okay.
one of his concerts and
Yeah.
he's just mixing and doesn't even care. And everybody's dancing and having a good time and he's just throwing stuff out. And these guys are going, "That's our music." And he's what? Oh my God. And it's just they're being,
Yeah.
and I think that's exactly it. And that's what I love. That's what I love about lore. We're getting close to time, so I'm gonna kind of start wrapping this up. But that's the Christian underground. Okay. Speaking Christ into the world through the kooky and the fringe and giving categories and trying to but also like the arts and encouraging people to go in and don't try to be, stick to the scripture that says that those who want to, first of all, those who want to be first must be last, right? To be least, to be willing to be the least, but also look at the examples of the good stewards in the Bible that they came from humble beginnings, and God, because he could trust them with little, could trust them with much. And it seems to be that is a precept that if people will be, I mean, the Bible says it in Proverbs that, that a man's talents will bring him before kings. And I think that this is it. Don't try to feel like if you're giving $100 to help crowdfund this show and it only reaches however many it reaches, but it's not a blockbuster film, don't feel like and I'm sorry, I'm all jazzed up. But don't feel like it's a waste of your money because it's not. It's coming into the underground and it's taking back an industry and it's taking back a form of art or a sphere of influence that was widely Christian to begin with, but you're not going to do it by trying to make these big giant films. You're going to do it by reaching people where they are. And trust me, that's why the independent film industry has been so successful for so long, is because those are the places that people who are being told by Hollywood, who's too busy remaking films that have already been made and were excellent to
Right.
begin with. Okay, I am absolutely boycotting The Crow, by the way. That was okay. That movie spoke to me when I was 14 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
Brandon Lee,
To all of us
I-
at that age. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Brandon Lee, God bless him, died making that film. And to have Skarsgård play Eric Draven is just in my mind is a spit in Brandon Lee's eyes. But I digress. But anyway, so let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. I want to definitely have you back on, dude. I would love to have us like um get some footage or sit down and watch some stuff and just kind of not critique it, but just kind of go over it because here's the truth of the matter. The gospel is such a beautiful story when it is seen through the light of God losing his family through sin and knowing always that he had a plan to bring his family back and to bring those that he created for that purpose, to bring them back into the family. And I love that story, and so we can get more into that, but let's take the remaining few minutes now and tell people where to find Lure. And if there are any aspiring um, filmmakers or people who've got some scripts out there, tell them how they can get in contact with Lure.
Yeah. So the Loor TV, LOOR.TV is the place to go check out the projects that we've got up there. And then we've got a queue of projects that are going to be being released as the subscriber count grows. And if the the best way to keep in touch is through the socials. We're at Watch Lore, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, and that's the best way to get in touch and keep in touch and get in contact with us. Um, and then really, uh, we're looking for the artists that are really excited about the underground, because 25 underground hits is more powerful than 2-3 blockbusters, right? The Because you look at what was really actually influential, and it's the things that affected the artists of the next generation. When you ask comedians, comic writers that are now writing the biggest shows in the country, where did they what influenced you? They talk about things like Mr. Show. They talk about things like Attack of the Show, right? They talk about those sorts of things. They don't and even Star Wars was really an underground. It was underground at the beginning, even though it's now the heart, one of the beating hearts of culture. It started as an underground thing that they were making. They were practicing how to do those practical effects in George Lucas's garage, because they didn't know how to do it, and so it wasn't it's a blockbuster now, but it didn't start that way. So I think we're looking for those artists. I'm super excited about a meeting I've got coming up Monday with a show that that is never going to go broad, right? It's not going to go broad, but it's the sort of show that's going to connect with people, and that's really what we're looking for right now. I think we're going to have our blockbusters in the future, but I want to build IP, that
Yes.
becomes a blockbuster. I don't want to, right now, I think I just saw a statistic that it's almost 70% of all movies in the theaters now are remakes or sequels. Um, it's like
Ooh.
68 point something, of
Yeah.
movies that are coming up in
Yeah.
the theaters are remakes or sequels, right? So,
Wow.
and like, I'm excited about the Blade remake. Blade was one of my favorite comic books, and I liked the
Yeah.
movies, and they're bringing it into the universe, and I would, but uh, Marvel started with Howard the Duck. That's the
Yes.
Marvel movies started with Howard the Duck. It didn't start with the Avengers. So we're
Yes.
so you've got to take your time and build IP, and be willing to just love God, serve your audience, get good at your craft, become as good of a Christian as you can, and as good at your craft as you can,
Yes.
and
Yes.
serve those people that love the kind of art you love, and not worry about the blockbuster, and trust that if you're good at your craft, you sit before kings.
Yes. Well, and then with that, that's a perfect way to finish this. So I want to thank you again, Jason, for coming. We're going to definitely have you back on, and we're going to be talking about this for a lot. You've got a film enthusiast right here. You've got a TV enthusiast. You got anything arts enthusiast here. So you have found a home here in the Christian Underground, and we hope definitely you feel the same way. With
Fantastic.
that being
Thanks for
said,
having me.
thank you. Absolutely, absolutely. With that being said, to the audience and to you, may God bless you, may He keep you, may He shine His countenance upon you and give you peace. God bless.